van man left him. There were palm trees and water and sailboats gently waggling their masts back and forth against a bright blue sky. Puggy thought it was the most beautiful place he had ever seen. He was feeling good. He was warm, and he had $35 cash, the most money he'd ever had at one time in his life. He decided to spend it on beer. He scouted around for a good spot, quickly rejecting the tourist bars in the Central Grove, where a beer could cost $5, which Puggy thought was way high, even for a guy who was pulling down $10 a vote. And so, after wandering to the seedier outskirts of Coconut Grove, Puggy found himself walking into the Jolly Jackal Bar and Grill. The Jolly Jackal was not upscale. It would have needed thousands of dollars worth of renovation just to ascend to the level of dive. It had a neon sign in the window, but part of it wasn't working, so it just said, "Ackle." When you walked in the front door, you could see straight back through the gloom to the toilet, which had lost its door some years back when a patron, frustrated in his efforts to operate the doorknob, smashed his way in with a fire extinguisher. The bar was dark and rancid with stale beer. The TV was tuned to motorcycle racing. There were names scrawled on the walls and crude drawings of genitalia. Puggy felt right at home. He sat at the bar, which was empty, except for a bearded man at the far end, talking to the bartender in a language that wasn't English, but it didn't sound to Puggy like Spanish either. The bartender, a thick man with a thick face, looked at Puggy, but didn't come over.
I'll take a Budweiser,
Puggy said. "Do you have money?" the bartender said. Puggy was not offended. He knew he looked like he didn't have money. Usually he didn't have money. "I got money," he said, and he put all of it, 3 10s and a 5, on the bar. The bartender, saying nothing, uncapped a long neck and set it in front of Puggy. He took Puggy's 5 and replaced it with $3.02. Then he went back to the bearded man and said something foreign, and they both laughed. Puggy didn't care. He was figuring out, at $1.50 a beer, how many beers he could buy. He couldn't pin down a definite number, but he knew it was going to be a lot. More than 10. He might even get some Slim Jims, if they had them here. Puggy was on his 4th beer when a couple of guys came in, one called Snake, whose T-shirt said Gators, and one called Eddie, whose T-shirt said, "You don't know Dick." They both wore cut-off jeans and flip-flops, but their feet were black with dirt, so it almost looked like they were wearing socks. Snake and Eddie referred to themselves as fishermen, although they did not fish. They did live on a boat. It had been abandoned by its legal owner because it had no engine and would sink if it were moved. Snake's and Eddie's actual source of income was standing in front of vacant parking spaces in Coconut Grove, and then, when a tourist car came along, directing the driver into the space, making arm motions as though this were a tricky maneuver that had to be done just right, like landing the space shuttle. Then Snake and Eddie would stand close by, waiting for a tip, which usually the tourist gave them, especially if it was dark. Puggy figured that Snake and Eddie must have been to the Jolly Jackal before, because as soon as they walked in, the bartender was coming toward them, pointing back at the door, saying, "Out! I tell you once before, out!"
No, man, no,"
said Eddie, holding his hands up in front of his chest, making peace.
"Look, we just want a couple drinks. We got money."
He was digging into his cut-off shorts, pulling out some quarters, some dimes and pennies, putting them on the bar. The bartender looked at the money, saying nothing.
"Okay,"
said Eddie, settling at the bar to Puggy's right, one stool away.
"Okay,"
he said again, because he could see the bartender was going to let them slide. Snake sat on the stool to Eddie's right. Eddie pointed at the cluster of coins, said,
"We'll take whatever much this'll get us."
The bartender, still saying nothing, counted the money, sliding the coins off the bar one by one into his hand. He put out 2 glasses and filled them with clear liquid from a bottle that had no label, then walked back to the bearded man.
"Asshole,"
remarked Eddie to Snake. Puggy, as soon as he determined that the situation was not going to require him to duck, went back to watching the TV, which was now showing pickup trucks racing. Puggy had never thought of that as a sport, but his policy with